So here's the $1 million question. Can the US compete with Chinese drones?
For almost the last 2 decades, Chinese-made drones have dominated the consumer market. Now, fears of Chinese espionage have forced some drone operators to switch to American-produced models, and away from leading Chinese companies like DJI, which owns over 70% of the market share worldwide.
These government bans in Florida, they're not just impacting first responders, police, firemen, they're also impacting people working at universities, so university researchers, and there's a lot of scientific research done with small drones.
DJI claims that its drones are secure and points to security evaluations as proof that some US critics
Do y'all believe that? I don't believe anybody telling me anything is secure these days. I don't believe it, sorry, no.
concern are overblown, and state and local government entities have spent millions on DJI drones, meaning that moving to a US-produced option could be both expensive and wasteful of previous purchases.
The US government has these approval lists or mechanisms for approving drone manufacturers. The problem is these are also extremely oriented toward law enforcement and public safety and defense because they were put together by the Department of Defense, Homeland Security.
Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine has elevated the need for cheap, reliable drones, such as those in the consumer market, as a key part of modern warfare. And even during the recent attacks by Hamas into Israel, drones were used to give the attackers an advantage.
Now we have small drones that you can buy for a few $100s or $1,000, taking over many of the tactical air combat roles that we saw manned aircraft performing.
And although the US arguably pioneered the use of drones in a military capacity, they're usually larger, more expensive, and not as easily replaced compared with the churn of consumer drones being used by both sides of the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
So some militaries do use our products, but more for disaster relief or civilian type operations. That we see as a valid use case, but we do not want our products used within combat.
Drones of many makes and models are being used in Ukraine, from small handmade first-person view drones to large heavy drones normally associated with filmmaking and other enterprise work.
So what we're seeing right now is Ukraine is consuming about 10,000 drones a month.
Chinese companies such as DJI and others have a large lead on cost-effective and capable drones, but some in the US think this dynamic isn't permanent.
There's been this question.
I ain't gonna lie, after hearing that, man, that makes me want to go straight to the stock market and see what companies are supplying these drones. What are the companies? And invest in a few of them, bro. Because if you're hearing, just common sense, if you're hearing Ukraine is going through over 10,000 a month, I'm just saying, that was just my first thought.
You know, different people have different perspectives on this of like, can a US company compete? Like, are we going to be able to like match the drones that are coming out of China?
I think it is going to be key that US produced drones or drones produced by trusted allies become more affordable.
The size of the global consumer drone market is around $4.1 billion, and in the US alone it's a little more than $1.1 billion, and the Chinese drone maker DJI owns more than 70% of the global market. DJI drones range from cheap to expensive depending on the model and features. They're known for being well made, and they come with great support in the form of DJI Care.
We're clearly the #1 manufacturer of civilian drones, right? So both for the consumer segment and for the enterprise or business segment, we're a clear leader by a very, very wide margin.
Eventually, DJI was able to take advantage both of the fact that they're located in Shenzhen, very close to a lot of electronics, and they also make genuinely quite high quality products. They're inexpensive, they're easy to use, they're reliable, increasingly so since 2016.
DJI pioneered small drone technology in the mid-2000s, and their drones continue to be very capable for the cost.
That first mover advantage has really helped create DJI as it is today. That and a commitment to innovation.
Surprisingly enough, people kind of counterintuitively assume this cheaper Chinese product's going to be less reliable, but in this case it's often not true. There's also some market incentives that have existed around why we don't have a really good Western or European competitor in this particular cheap civilian drone market.
China's Ministry of Commerce has recently released export restrictions on certain drones, such as those with long flight times or certain sensors. This effectively limits the sale of these products to enterprise customers.
On the China export restrictions, that's really focused on trying to ensure that drones are not being used for combat use, And DJI builds civilian products.
Several states in the US have moved to ban the use of DJI drones by state agencies such as police departments or fire departments over data concerns. And a federal ban has been floated by several senators that would restrict federal agencies from using Chinese-produced drones.
It's genuinely worrying that we've reached a point where people can kind of win an argument just by naming China. People are not looking at the facts as we would want them to. The facts around DJI are that we've been audited by US government. We've had other companies come in and audit our products as well for cybersecurity, and there's been no threat identified.
The problem with making small consumer drones like quadcopters in America is that the price of producing them goes up because material and labor costs, among other things, are higher than in China.
Around 2017, 2016, a lot of the Western competitors dropped out of the market. They didn't want to compete. They also didn't make some great choices sometimes.
And even if a drone is made in America, making one out of parts solely sourced in the US is quite difficult.
But we've got to create the conditions where U.S. companies can win these contracts, particularly when it comes to government provision of drones, local law enforcement provision of drones, and even in our national critical infrastructure, the companies that operate and maintain our electrical power grids, our transportation systems.
I mean, DJI is a very impressive hardware company on many dimensions. They've been at it for a while. They make really sleek integrated systems. Our basic outlook on the market is that it's still very early days.
Skydio recently moved to focus on the enterprise market, and they hope that artificial intelligence can be a game changer in who can operate small drones.
The opportunity that we see and that many of our customers see is much broader deployment, much more impact, and really giving a drone to everybody who could benefit from one, not just everybody who happens to be an expert pilot. Our products are definitely more expensive. I mean, our cost structure is quite a bit higher than our peers coming from China. Which is why we've chosen to compete on the basis of having a product that's got kind of a different value proposition based on AI.
So that makes sense as why you don't see, like we heard for a while, a lot of these restaurants, they're going to be using drones. We have hearing that for a while. They would be partnering with like a Uber Eats or something like that, and you would, in a sense, place your order and drones would show up to your house with your food, drop it off somewhere nearby, like maybe a mailbox or something like that. Drop your food off, you go out there and get it. I've been wondering what's the delay on that. Like when they first brought it to our attention, they were just talking like it would be here next week, next month, a few months at the latest. This was in the works, but it never happened. Some places have it, you hear, but you probably can count them on one hand, maybe two, if you're lucky. So I was wondering what's taking so long, what's going on, but this makes sense now. Now you're having to rely on where the drones are being made, and if they're being made here, they're going to be more expensive, and now you have to sit back and look, is that beneficial for us? Is that going to put us in the red, or is it going to put us in the, you know what I mean, in the green? How do we, can we afford to do this? So I'm guaranteeing that a lot of companies and different things that wanted to do this, wanted to partner with Uber Eats looking at this is now looking to see, is it worth it monetarily? Probably not right now at the price of things.
Around 2017, again, law enforcement began buying huge numbers of drones, and they started buying a lot of drones made by DJI.
While some police and first responders use DJI drones, US-based companies have also been creating drones marketed towards law enforcement, firefighters, and other government organizations.
Law enforcement using it for things like surveillance, for search and rescue, for things like monitoring protests. Of course, it's very controversial. During COVID-19, law enforcement used drones to monitor public movements.
I think when you talk about sort of the non-military or non-law enforcement application of drones, there's no immediate threat to using Chinese components. But what we have to prepare for is if there is a conflict with China down the road and they cut off that flow of components, then the law enforcement and military application of drones in America could be curtailed.
My name is Blake Resnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Brink Drones. We basically build public safety technology.
Brink Drones recently signed a deal to send several drones to the New York City Police Department. Drones aren't anything new to the New York City Police Department. but their use has only increased as the technology has become more ubiquitous.
We want to utilize this technology to complement our crisis management team, complement our police personnel, and respond appropriately and be able to respond in record time. You know, a drone could get to a location in 30, 40 seconds, where we're going to have crowded streets where police are not going to be able to get there as fast.
The impact.
So if you're looking for an opportunity to make more money right now, you see we have an extreme problem that needs to be solved. And that's normally where regular people become million and billionaires, when they see a problem that needs to be solved. If you can figure out how to engineer and manufacture a drone and create one here and sell it to people, you'll make some money right now. You can see clearly it's needed.
Is already super positive. I think the potential impact is, the story everywhere is could be much, much greater. There are certainly valid concerns. We don't want to live in a world where we're all being sort of proactively, randomly surveilled from the air. I don't want that. I don't think most folks in law enforcement want that. And that's not the reality today. I think it's a possible future that we have to be on the lookout for, and we are as a company.
People weren't sure about the military efficacy of small and micro drones. We're seeing it in spades on a daily basis in the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
The U.S. Department of Defense recently announced an initiative called Replicator, which among other things aims to field thousands of small drones in a fairly short time frame.
I think this is a sign of a lot of really forward-leaning, sharp folks in the U.S. government and the U.S. DoD seeing the trends and seeing that small, light, survivable systems that are smart enough to do useful things on the battlefield are crucial for the future of our military might, and making investments in that direction.
I like the principle of Replicator, the idea that we're going to look for rapid procurement authorities and a quick experimentation timeline in order to field unique weapon systems that can get us the attritable, low-cost drones and potentially strike weapons that I think we need for a conflict across the Taiwan Strait.
We do not have the drone factories right now to produce these systems in those quantities. They just don't exist. And we also don't have all of the requisite supply chain components that we would need in order to scale up to that production. So even if you did have a really advanced drone factory, guess what? We don't have brushless motor manufacturers. We don't have sufficiently good camera gimbal manufacturers. We don't have companies building flight computers or radios at a competitive price point. The US is just behind in this technology, and I think it's going to take...
So what happens when you be relying on people outside of the country for so long? Outside of the US, we've been reliant for too long, instead of, while we were being reliant, trying to learn and develop and make certain things in-house ourselves. That way we wouldn't always be reliant. Now look at us. Look at the position we're in.
Replicator, but frankly, a lot more than Replicator to actually fix this problem.
Learning how to stop small drones could be just as important for U.S. national security.
In many instances, the most effective way for a country like Iran, Russia, or China to attack us domestically might be to insert special operations teams which could use small drones against us. So we need to think about drone defenses not just as terrorist threat or a disruptive threat from a small-scale actor, but as part of a strategic campaign by a near-peer adversary against our homeland.
Fordham Technologies aims to field sensors and a drone hunter that can help defend against small drone threats.
I think it's just really important to understand that these drone threats have become a key part of any modern conflict. They can be used everything from lone wolf actors, single acting terrorists, all the way up through full out army scale warfare, as we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia. And for both sides of that conflict, they are indispensable tools for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, targeting. And without them, I think it'd be difficult to win these modern warfare. So it's a real part of our modern threat profile, both domestically and in war zones.
I am hoping there will be more pushes to develop more American and European, just generally more competitors in the space. It's not great that we've only got one company. It's less, it obviously is very politically relevant as a Chinese company. Even putting that aside, it's just not healthy for the space to only have one overwhelmingly dominant company.
If Replicator replicates a commercial procurement model, I think we're going to be in great shape. If it replicates the traditional military procurement model of nothing will fail here, it'll eventually become a high-cost, low-productivity event.
What we've seen early on in the history of the drone industry is widespread consumer adoption. So people basically buying flying cameras. And that's been great, but I think really the future of this industry is autonomous drones launching out of boxes, responding to 911 calls, accomplishing, critical infrastructure inspection in an automated way, being utilized in defense applications. That's really where all of this is going.
Any attempts to ban DJI are really not just damaging DJI, but damaging the entire ecosystem around drones. So there's a lot at stake here. We really hope that the politicians will look at the facts, actually look at the audit reports that have been done by U.S. government institutions as well as private companies that show that our products are data secure.
One day, if China says, okay, maybe...
It's too much at risk, too much at stake. Like, you saying that it's secured means nothing to me. Nothing to me. People have been telling us that we've been secure and our identities and different things are secure. But now we hear what? You can tap into the Wi-Fi system. You can tap into different cameras inside your household and people can see you. But yet they're still preaching secure. So you telling me that this drone is secure does nothing for me at all. They may still choose to go with it, but I still won't believe it's secure.
America's catching up or getting the lead in this endeavor, and they can just cut off our components and set us back for years. So we need to think about that and to not drive an over-reliance on Chinese components as we move ahead.
The larger scale we reach, the more leverage we get and the more that we can lower our costs, and there's very much a virtuous cycle there. So I don't think it's an impossible mountain to climb. It is a mountain, but we're going up it now.
So here's another conversation about the Apple car. This is what killed the Apple car.
Strong confidence. They could take out General Motors. They could make a better Tesla. And they had this ambition to do something that really had not been done before.
It was never going to work.
This is a tale of grandiose...
How do you know it was never going to work? But she might have some insight that we don't have. But I was excited for the Apple car. Just thinking about all the things that you could do with your iPhone. Now think about that with your car. Like, I was excited to see the capabilities. I know I wouldn't going to be able to afford one, but maybe down the line I can hope. I can hope. But I was excited for it.
Those plans to invent a new kind of car, undone by strategic mistakes. The rise, fall, rise, and then death of what was codenamed Project Titan. Apple is incredibly secretive. The company doesn't talk about new products until they're ready, so never publicly admitted to working on a car. In fact, the closest that Apple CEO Tim Cook ever got to doing so was in this interview with me in 2017.
There is a major disruption looming.
He proceeded to lay out 3 innovations that he predicted would upturn the car industry. The first was electric vehicles.
If you've driven an all-electric car, it's actually a marvelous experience. Plus, you have ride sharing on top of this.
So services like Uber and Lyft, and finally, self-driving cars.
We're focusing on autonomous systems. Clearly, one purpose of autonomous systems is self-driving cars. We sort of see it as the mother of all AI projects.
Each of those technologies seem to present an opportunity to disrupt the $2 trillion car industry.
Initially, I thought the rationale behind the car was what Apple does, delivering a piece of hardware, and the car is that piece of hardware, and then build on top of that hardware that becomes a platform to deliver services and experiences. So in that respect, the car followed the Apple strategy.
Let's scroll back to 2014, when it all started, 3 years before my interview with Cook.
The beginning of the Apple Car project was actually the company exploring if it should buy Tesla. They ended up not doing that and instead decided to start exploring what it would take to build their own car on their own. They put some of the brightest minds at the company on this. The hardware division was granted billions of dollars in funding to hire anyone it needed inside Apple or outside Apple. They hired people from Porsche, Lamborghini, Audi, you name it, to come over there and build a car. Johnny Ive, Apple's design chief at the time, had this idea to recreate the old school Volkswagen bus from the 1950s and the 1960s. But the idea was not to build a car for people who love cars today, but build the future of the car.
And safer for all of us to drive.
All sorts of...
Okay, no. No. I would have been like, no. I'd have continuously said no. I wouldn't have been feeling that, bro. Get him out. We'd have had to, if I was on that team, I would have been like, why did we hire him? I already don't like it. Let's get him out of here.
Ideas are thrown around. They consider only selling the car in white. There would be no steering wheel or front-facing seats, and passengers would control everything with touchscreens and Siri. For all the big ideas and blue sky thinking, however, the project soon starts to hit problems, and there's confusion over whether the priority should be to compete with Tesla in electric cars or Google, which was making big leaps in self-driving vehicles.
By 2016, there was a ton of disagreement on the Apple executive team. There were difficulties figuring out a way to actually produce the vehicle. There were concerns over profits.
Enter Bob Mansfield, a semi-retired executive who had developed products such as the MacBook Air. It's the first of many leadership and direction changes to hit the project, and it'll entail laying off hundreds of engineers. Mansfield tells them that rather than building a car, Apple will focus on developing the most advanced driverless technology, Level 5 autonomy.
By building the self-driving brain, they really gave themselves options. On one hand, they were able to partner. They talked partnerships with Tesla, with Mercedes-Benz, with BMW.
Revolutionary. At the same time, Tesla goes from a $50 billion valuation to a $1 trillion company in less than 2 years. Electric vehicles suddenly seem more appealing.
I think the early success of Tesla led people to believe that maybe there was opportunity in the car industry to work with bigger margins.
That helped give Apple the confidence to make another pivot. Around that time, Doug Field, the Tesla executive who developed the Model 3 and took over the Apple Car project in 2017, calls a meeting to show off what his team has been able to pull together.
Apple has this secretive, several hundred-acre test facility in the heart of the Arizona desert, outside of Phoenix. They gathered a bunch of senior people on the Apple Car team, alongside Tim Cook and others.
Cook is impressed by what he sees, according to people who were present, and says he'll finally throw his full weight behind the project. Apple will build an electric car that has full driverless technology. But even that decision doesn't last long. Field leaves to join Ford in 2021 and is replaced by Kevin Lynch, a longtime Apple manager who worked on the watch.
What's your plan, car?
It's becoming clear that autonomous cars are a long way away. Maybe
That's what I'm saying. Maybe they were just, I don't know, they were moving too fast. They needed to kind of slow down and still continue to baby step this thing forward instead of seeing it once, going, okay, now I'm ready to get behind it. Let's do it. Let's try to get this thing. I feel like them trying to compete with maybe the likes of a Tesla forced them to kind of rush things a little bit too fast. You already know this is where the industry's headed. You're already the leader in cell phones and watches and other things that make you a ton of money, AirPods and stuff like that. Why rush this? Why not slow roll it out and utilize the mistakes that are made by a Tesla and these other companies to your advantage before you actually roll yours out?
in a decade or more. So there's another flip-flop away from self-driving tech. It's the least ambitious version of the project yet. Make an electric car that competes directly with Tesla. But by 2023, the outside world is changing. Artificial intelligence starts consuming the tech industry. And after Tesla's early successes, electric vehicles are facing a reality check. November 2022 saw the release of ChatGPT. As the world goes AI crazy, Google has its own big AI division, and Microsoft is the biggest investor in OpenAI, the developer of ChatGPT. And while there's plenty of AI innovation under the hood of Apple's products, it's still unclear what Tim Cook's big generative AI play will be.
Where Apple needs to catch up is in that interface between the consumer and the generative AI engine that has a name like Copilot or Gemini.
And the electric vehicle market is starting to lose its luster, with sales growth slowing. for 3 reasons. EVs are expensive, and high interest rates mean they're even harder to afford. The first generation of EVs are now hitting the second-hand market, and they're not holding their value as well as combustion engine cars. Established car makers are starting to release
and that was one of the things that was pitched to us when we were looking at a Tesla, was like, oh man, they hold value. It'll appreciate instead of depreciate like that. It'll hold its value for a lot longer than these other vehicles out there. That's the type of stuff that was talked about. I think that may have convinced a lot of people to hop out there. Other than them wanting the new latest and greatest, they were probably also sold on that as well, as it holding its value.
EV models, meaning competition is tougher and profits are lower.
One specific part of Apple's success is that on the hardware side, they have, by and large, between 25 and 30% margin. That is impossible on a car.
All of this provokes another final rethink at Apple. The 3 megatrends that Cook highlighted in 2017 have all lost their appeal. Self-driving isn't happening anytime soon, ride-sharing isn't a great business, and electric vehicles probably can't deliver the kinds of profits that Apple shareholders expect.
They have some of the world's best minds on artificial intelligence working on this system that may never come to light because it is so difficult. On the other hand, they have this separate AI team trying to catch up to OpenAI and Microsoft and Google on generative AI.
So Tim Cook makes a big decision. On February 26th, after most people have left work, the car team gets an email announcing an all-hands meeting the next day.
And people started to realize something is up. Then 10 a.m. the next morning, they all gathered into conference rooms and around their desks, and they tuned in to a video announcement. It was a 12-minute presentation. They were pretty succinct. Thank you for all your efforts. We're immediately winding down Project Titan.
The Apple car is dead. Those working on self-driving technology will join Apple's main AI group. The rest have to find new jobs inside or outside the company.
Repurposing the people that were working on Project Titan to AI makes sense given the opportunity in AI.
It solves a lot of problems for Apple. It gets a bunch of top AI minds working on its main AI goals, and it can reallocate the billions of dollars a year it's spending on the car towards developing AI. That tech could be essential to the future success of the iPhone, the device that still accounts for the majority of Apple's revenue. Look at this chart. After years of massive growth, Apple is struggling to grow revenue. Without the car,
Struggling or still doing good? I mean, I think sometimes when they use certain words, I don't know, their definition of struggling and my definition of struggling are 2 completely different things, because I see it still up there, making money.
investors are wondering where the next leg of growth will come from. Some think that could be the Vision Pro. The problem is that if that device achieves everything Apple wants over the next few years, it could end up replacing the iPhone. You may not own both.
It's something that has the real potential in the next half decade to replace your iPhone, to be the future of that product. But Apple needs...
He said a half decade. Okay, I could see that potentially. You know what I mean? They got to make this thing, it's so bulky right now that it could probably give you headaches or different things like that, tension headaches or something. They got to get it better to where it's smaller, just like how cell phones started out huge and now they're like so small now. Yeah. They got to work on this thing, but I could see that.
Supplementary revenue. They need wholly new product categories that don't take away from others.
And as car makers start to question just how profitable the electric vehicle market can be, the fact that Apple has given up is hardly a vote of confidence.